Weltweit scheinen aktuell zu den alten Krisen immer neue hinzuzukommen. Teilen Sie diese Ansicht? Welche Krise, abgesehen vom Ukraine-Konflikt, bereitet Ihnen die größten Sorgen?
Globally, the old crises seem to be joined by an increasing number of new ones. Would you agree with this view? Apart from the Ukraine conflict, which crisis are you most concerned about?
I would say that we are living in a time of great geopolitical transformation. And when you have this kind of tectonic plate, moving around, there's going to be friction. The friction is going to create points of crises, and it's been ongoing. I don't see that, today there's more crises. I just think that maybe we're starting to wake up to their existence and their potential ramifications. I think the obvious, choice for the crisis of most concern is the ongoing U.S.-Chinese crisis over Taiwan. And this also includes the South China Sea, because it brings with it the potential of military conflict between two nuclear powers. And unlike the seeming reticence that the United States has towards directly engaging Russia over the issue of Ukraine, there doesn't seem to be that kind of self-restraint when it comes to China, that the United States is talking about the possibility of direct confrontation with China should the Taiwan crisis manifest itself militarily. So this has me very concerned. I'm also very concerned about the situation with North Korea. I don't think the United States, South Korea, or Japan understand just how dangerous the situation is. North Korea has walked away from its former offer of denuclearization because of the lack of interest shown by the Biden administration in furthering or promoting or pursuing the opportunities that had presented themselves under Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump was unable to close the deal, but the deal was still on the table. Biden just refused to pick it up and move forward. And so North Korea has shut down that possibility, and they are now aggressively incorporating an active nuclear deterrence as part of their defense strategy. This nuclear deterrence includes the potential for preemptive nuclear strikes should North Korea deem that their existential survival is at risk. And of course, when the United States and South Korea speak of the potential of preemptive attacks designed to decapitate the North Korean leadership as part of any future conflict with North Korea, what we're talking about is the assurance that any future conflict will become nuclear in nature. And this would mean the destruction of South Korea in its totality, destruction of much of Japan, and the potential destruction of some American territories and American cities. If somebody reflected on this reality, maybe we'd come up with a policy that more mirrored the reticence we've shown in Europe towards provoking a conflict with Russia. North Korea is a nation that, because of its nuclear weapons capability, must be shown the same deference that Russia has when it comes to its own national security interests. This doesn't mean that the West should surrender, but the West certainly shouldn't be provoking a conflict that, if it comes into fruition, will inevitably become nuclear.
Schauen wir nach Brasilien. Dort stürmten Bolsonaro-Anhänger kürzlich den Nationalkongress, ähnlich dem Sturm auf das US-Kapitol 2021. Inwieweit kann man einen Vergleich zwischen beiden Ereignissen ziehen?
Let's have a look at Brazil. Bolsonaro's supporters recently rushed the National Congress in a similar way to the attack on the US Capitol in 2021. To what extent can we draw a comparison between the two events?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is the fact that in a environment that promotes the polarization of a nation's citizenry, democracy suffers. Normally what happens in a democracy, what should happen, is that the people have faith in the institutions of government, including the electoral system that allows them to express their will through the power of the vote to put people in office to represent them under the belief that those people could be held accountable to the people through the electoral process. But when the people lose faith in the electoral process, whether it's for cause or because of misperceptions, then the system starts to fall apart. And when you have societies that have become polarized, where the political differences are so great that the sides are unwilling or unable to work with one another, you create a zero-sum game, meaning that an election that results in a victory to one side will disenfranchise almost totally the other side. Therefore, it's in the other side's interest, if they haven't won the election, to discredit the election. And this is especially the case in political movements that are outside of the establishment. And we saw this the case of Donald Trump's repostured Republican Party that was built more around the cult of personality of Make America Great Again and less about traditional Republican conservative values. I would say the same thing is the case with Bolsonaro and his supporters. They don't represent the traditional power structures of Brazil. They represent a new populist movement. And what we saw with both Trump's followers and Bolsonaro's followers, when it became clear they were going to lose the election, they discredited the election. Both of their leaders created the potential for electoral discrediting by promoting the issue of fraud, whether it's real or just perceived, it doesn't matter. The people believed it, and then they acted on it. We saw in the United States on January 6th, a crowd of people who believed that an election was being stolen in front of their very eyes launched an attack on the Capitol of the United States, the Congress, for the purpose of disrupting constitutional processes designed to certify the victory of Joe Biden, which is, of course, what they didn't want. They wanted Donald Trump to be declared the victor. And I think we saw in Brazil people storming the institution of government, the Supreme Court, the Congress, the presidential residence, in an effort to provoke a military intervention on their behalf to delegitimize and remove from power President Lula and replace them with Bolsonaro, who lost the election, but his followers were unable or unwilling to accept that result, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. So what we're seeing here is a failure of democracy. Whenever you have populist movements that resort to violence to impose their will on a system that's supposed to be governed by the will of the people through an electoral process, that means the system's fundamentally broken. I think we can say that that's the case in the United States and in Brazil.
Diese Woche besuchte Joe Biden zum ersten Mal die US-Grenze zu Mexiko. Welche Rolle spielte dieser Besuch für den US-Präsident? Was könnte er bezweckt haben?
This week, Joe Biden visited the US border with Mexico for the first time. What role did this visit play for the US president? What may have been his purpose?
Well, I think it's clear that there's a crisis at the border. America has a long-standing, unresolved issue with illegal immigration. And it's an issue that's become polarized. The Democrats have articulated policies that seem to be more favorable to illegal immigrants coming in and being granted various pathways to citizenship or legitimacy. The Republicans have taken a more extreme interpretation, seeking to stop these immigrants from coming in, and if they do come in, to treat them as lawbreakers, to get them out of the country, to take control of the borders. Joe Biden has inherited a border crisis from Donald Trump that had certain extreme solutions that Biden had attacked during his campaign, but now that he's become president, has found that actually are probably very effective in reducing the pressures that are being placed on the United States at the borders by waves of illegal immigrants. But this has created a political problem for him amongst his base. When a president sits in Washington, D.C. and allows a a crisis to unfold through long distance management, then it becomes a crisis of leadership. So I think President Biden felt that he needed to go to the border to make his presence known there, to assert his leadership, to create the visuals that he was in charge, that he was engaged. Even if the policy itself doesn't change, at least the perception that the president is on the job, focused on this issue, is somewhat of a political relief valve to remove some of the pressure that was built up by the ongoing crisis.
Kommen wir zum Ukraine-Konflikt. Bei einem Treffen hat Polens Präsident Duda dem ukrainischen Präsidenten Zelensky die Lieferung von Kampfpanzern zugesagt. Erhöht sich damit der Druck auf die Bundesregierung, ebenfalls Kampfpanzer an die Ukraine zu liefern?
Let's move on to the Ukraine conflict. Poland's President Duda has promised to his Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky the delivery of battle tanks. Does this increase the pressure on the German government to also supply battle tanks to Ukraine?
I think the answer is yes. I think the German government recognizes that this is a massive escalation. I think, I can't speak for the German government and their policies, but I do think in the inner sanctum of wherever they retreat away from the public eye, there's a growing recognition on the part of Germany's leadership that the Ukraine conflict is a lost cause, and that the longer this conflict goes on, the greater harm will be done to Ukraine, and the greater the chances of regional instability resulting from the defeat of Ukraine. Not only the embarrassment to Germany and NATO, but the humanitarian issues that will be accrued when tens of millions of refugees flee across the Ukrainian border into Europe, expecting some sort of to be received and provided support. There's also the issue of NATO and how NATO will deal with an emboldened Russia that will emerge from a Ukrainian victory more confident in its posture regarding a new European security framework. And so I think the Germans are looking for an off-ramp. They're hoping to find a diplomatic solution to minimize or mitigate against the various harmful outcomes that I just talked about, and providing Ukraine with Leopard 2 tanks just prolongs the agony of Ukraine. I think any military professional will tell you that the Leopard 2 is not a game changer. It's not a game winner. It is a target. Yes, some Leopard 2 tanks will have an effect on the battlefield. Yes, they'll kill some Russians. Yes, they'll destroy some Russian tanks. But at the end of the day, pretty much every Leopard 2 that's provided to Ukraine will end up either destroyed, broken, captured by the Russians. It'll result in an intensification of combat operations, which means more dead Ukrainians, more lost territory, more destroyed cities, more refugees, more humanitarian disaster. The Leopard 2 tank is not a magic weapon. It's an old weapon. It has an unproven combat record in large-scale ground combat, such as it'll face in Ukraine. It has a mixed record in, with the Turks employing it in Syria. We don't know if that's because of bad tactics on the part of the Turks, but what we do know is that Leopards burn when hit by anti-tank missiles. And the Russians have a lot of anti-tank missiles. The Russians have a lot of tanks. The Russians have a lot of helicopters. The Russians have a lot of things that kill tanks. And simply providing the Leopard 2 to the Ukrainians is just giving the Russians more opportunity to kill Ukrainian tanks and kill Ukrainian soldiers without changing what is the inevitable outcome, a Russian victory.